at the beginning of chapter 11. Suddenly, Lean's expression darkened. The very instant he turned toward the big man, he slapped the man's hand away with ruthless precision. A dull crack echoed as bones bruised beneath the force. The fatty staggered back, face draining of color, retreating like a terrified chicken. It wasn't the pain that frightened him most, it was the aura. A bone-chilling presence rolled off Lean like an invisible tide. Just one glance had nearly scared him out of his wits. In that brief moment, the fatty felt as though he were standing before someone who had occupied a position of absolute authority for many years. And he was right. Lean was no simple character. The next day, at dawn, a middle-aged man entered the spacious hall and announced that they would soon be taken to complete their household registrations. Once registered, they would officially become residents of Lioli Island. But there was a condition. They were not to say anything they shouldn't. Otherwise, their safety could not be guaranteed. The man continued calmly, explaining that they were to identify themselves as residents of Western Do Island, whose homeland had been destroyed by a devastating windstorm. That was why they had fled to Lioli Island as refugees. Afterward, he told them they were free to ask questions. No one dared to speak. Seeing the silence, the middle-aged man ordered everyone to change into tattered clothing. Then, under his lead, and under the watchful eyes of 4 or 5 men dressed in black, they were guided through a hidden passage out of the karst cave and onto the surface. Their group numbered several dozen. It wasn't small. Yet as they passed through the island, most residents merely cast them a casual glance before losing interest altogether. Clearly, scenes like this were nothing new. They wound through the residential districts for who knew how long before finally stopping in front of a manor. Not long after, a young servant at the gate went inside to announce their arrival, then returned and led them through a side door on the left into a large hall. Inside, 2 or 3 other groups, over 100 people in total, were already gathered. Soon, it was their turn. The middle-aged man, Sun Jiang, respectfully greeted Steward Xiao, one of the island lord's aides, overseeing the registration. Steward Xiao calmly asked whether the group Sun Jiang had brought were all refugees to be registered. After receiving confirmation, he asked another question. Were they wealthy or of noble background? Sun Jiang smiled faintly and withdrew an item from the breast pocket of his robe. He replied that they were all from wealthy families on Dao Island. He presented the treasure and sighed, adding that it was unfortunate their wealth and glory had vanished like bubbles when disaster struck. Without the protection of an immortal master, nothing endured. Now, they had no choice but to travel thousands of miles to seek refuge on Lioli Island. He added that a windstorm had raged just days earlier. Even Lioli Island had been affected, but the Western Islands had suffered far worse. Over 200 islands had been erased, countless mortals lost at sea. Fortunately, the immortal masters had shown mercy and ordered the rescue of refugees. Steward Xiao nodded. He praised Sun Jiang's Tian Balu for their dedication and assured him that he would report everything truthfully to the island lord. When rewards from the immortal masters were distributed, Sun Jiang would surely receive his share. Then, Steward Xiao began processing the registrations. Before long, it was Lean's turn. When Steward Xiao raised his head and saw Lean's calm posture and composed demeanor, he instinctively sensed the bearing of an important figure. Suppressing his surprise, he asked Lean for his name. After Lean replied, Steward Xiao inscribed it onto a blank paper talisman and handed it over, instructing him to place a drop of blood on it. Lean bit his thumb and complied. Steward Xiao explained that this spirit talisman would serve as Lean's proof of identity. From that moment on, it would be required for everything on the island: work assignments, grain distribution, inspections, and more. He warned him solemnly never to lose it. As Steward Xiao spoke at length, Sun Jiang, standing beside him, was puzzled. He couldn't understand why an aide of the island lord was being so meticulous and courteous toward Lean. Still, the process moved swiftly. Soon, everyone had received their Lioli Island household registrations. They did not return to the karst cave. Instead, Sun Jiang led them into the courtyard of a residence. Smiling with satisfaction, he announced that since the registrations were complete, they could now sign the contract. Without hesitation, Such Chongyu stepped forward. He calmly took out a paper talisman, bit his finger, and smeared his blood onto it. The talisman, bearing his name, instantly dissipated into thin air. This was the so-called second of the 3 contracts. Once they were fully settled, Such Chongyu vowed to sign the final one as promised. Sun Jiang rubbed his forehead, clearly displeased. He muttered that dealing with people from the departed realm was always troublesome. If not for the immortal master's orders, their Tian Balu would never engage in such an unprofitable affair. Then he announced the benefits. All residents of Lioli Island could claim housing using their household registration talisman. Additionally, during their first year, they would receive a fixed amount of grain every month free of charge. Although this information was important, Such Chongyu was more concerned about cultivation. What must they do if they wish to cultivate? Sun Jiang answered honestly. Mortals returning from the land of exile carried far more miasma in their bodies than ordinary people. If they wished to cultivate, they must first expel it. That much they already knew. The real question was how. Sun Jiang explained there were several methods. The first was the island's body-purifying spirit pool. Soaking in it for a full day and night could completely completely remove all miasma. However, the materials required to open the spirit pool were astonishingly expensive. Even wealthy Lioli Island could only open it once every 3 years. He added, as if in thought, that the last opening had been a year ago, meaning they would need to wait 2 more years. Worse still, the number of available spots was extremely limited, and competition was fierce. Outsiders like them, with no foundation, stood little chance. Such Chongyu asked about the other methods. Sun Zhang continued. The second method was to cultivate the profound yellow heart cleansing incantation paired with specific medicines and a controlled diet. Over time, 5 to 6 years, it would gradually alter their constitution and purge the miasma completely. It was slow, but stable, and it didn't require any extraordinary price. Both the incantation and its elixirs could be purchased at the island's pharmacies. Such Chongyu frowned deeply. 5 or 6 years was no small span. He asked if those were the only 2 methods. At that moment, Sun Jiang's expression darkened. There was a third method, he said, to become a test subject. And that brings us to the end of this part of my simulated path to immortality.